In 122 AD, Roman Emperor Hadrian arrived in the freezing rain of Britain and issued an order that forever changed the landscape: the construction of a massive stone wall stretching 73 miles from the River Tyne to the Solway Firth. At first glance, it looked like a monument to Roman power, but in reality, it was a barrier of defeat. Rome, the unstoppable empire that had crushed Carthage and entirely subdued Gaul, drew a physical line in the earth and said, "No further." North of that line lay Caledonia, modern-day Scotland, a rugged land of fierce tribes that resisted Roman conquest for over 150 years. Why did the mightiest empire in the world fail here? Was it the brutal terrain, the unyielding warriors, or Rome's own internal limits? To truly understand this monumental failure, we need to break down the invasions, the blood-soaked campaigns, and the desperate attempts at control that pushed Rome to build its most famous wall. Rome's complicated relationship with Britain didn't start with Hadrian. It started with Caesar. In 55 BCE, Julius Caesar crossed the Channel and raided Britain. He won skirmishes, made a show of force, and left. He came back the following year, pushed deeper, and left again. Rome then stayed away from Britain for nearly 100 years. Think about that. The empire that never stopped expanding paused for a century before trying again. When Emperor Claudius finally invaded in 43 AD with 40,000 soldiers, southern Britain fell quickly. Roman roads carved through the land. Tribes submitted. The legions marched north, confident that Scotland would follow the same pattern. But the terrain changed. Hills became mountains. Forests became wild highlands with no roads, no towns, no infrastructure Rome could use. And the tribes up north didn't behave like any enemy Rome had faced before. They didn't retreat to cities. They didn't negotiate. They didn't break. Rome was walking into something it didn't yet understand. Rome called them the Caledonians, a loose confederation of northern tribes that proved impossible to pin down. Their biggest weapon wasn't their warriors, it was their land. Scotland's highlands, its bogs, its narrow mountain passes, all of it dismantled Roman military doctrine piece by piece. Roman warfare relied on open formations, clear supply lines, and decisive pitched battles. Scotland offered none of that. The Caledonians fought on their own terms. They ambushed Roman columns in narrow passes, attacked supply lines, and vanished back into the hills before Rome could regroup. They didn't need to defeat Rome outright. They just needed to make every day in Scotland more costly than it was worth. And here's what truly made them dangerous. They had no capital city, no central king, no single point of failure. When Rome conquered an enemy, it captured the capital, removed the leadership, and absorbed the population. The Caledonians gave Rome none of those options. There was no city to burn, no king to capture, no surrender to demand. The Roman historian Tacitus described them as proud, fierce, and untamable. He was right, because the Caledonians understood something Rome didn't, that as long as they kept fighting, Rome could never truly win. In 83 AD, Rome finally got what it wanted: an open battle. General Agricola had spent years methodically pushing north, burning Caledonian villages, destroying food supplies, and forcing the tribes into a corner. It worked. Around 30,000 Caledonians gathered at Mons Graupius, a hillside location somewhere in northern Scotland, and decided to make their stand. Agricola unleashed his auxiliary infantry first, holding his Roman legions in reserve. The auxiliaries crashed into the Caledonian lines while Roman cavalry swept the flanks. The Caledonians fought hard, but Roman discipline was relentless. The formation held, advanced, and systematically tore through the Caledonian ranks. Those who broke and ran were cut down by cavalry. Those who stood their ground were overwhelmed by sheer Roman coordination. In a matter of hours, 10,000 Caledonians lay dead. Roman casualties, 360 men. By every military measure, it was a massacre, and it changed absolutely nothing. The surviving Caledonians scattered into the highlands overnight. No surrender, no submission, no peace treaty. Agricola woke up the next morning holding a blood-soaked hillside with no enemy left to govern. The villages were ash. The people were gone. He had won the battle, but there was nothing left to occupy. Shortly after, Agricola was recalled to Rome. The northern campaign was quietly shelved, and Scotland remained exactly as ungovernable as the day Rome first crossed its border. Rome had delivered its hardest punch. Scotland absorbed it and kept going. Then came the story that still haunts historians today. The Legio IX Hispana, the Ninth Legion, was one of Rome's most elite fighting forces. They had served in Britain since the Claudian invasion of 43 AD, spending decades garrisoned at York, fighting Roman wars across the island. Experienced, battle-hardened, and deeply embedded in Britain's military history. Their last confirmed historical record places them in York around 108 AD. After that, silence. No records, no transfer orders anyone can conclusively confirm. No monument to their disbandment. One of Rome's greatest legions simply vanishes from history. The most enduring theory is that they marched north into Scotland and were destroyed. In 122 AD, Hadrian came to Britain. He ordered the construction of a wall, 73 miles long, 15 feet high, a fort every Roman mile, and 10,000 soldiers to man it permanently. Rome called it border management. But look at what it actually was: a permanent admission that Rome was going no further north. To understand why, you have to think like Rome thought. Every major Roman conquest paid for itself. Gaul had tin, copper, gold, and fertile agricultural land. Egypt fed the entire empire. Even southern Britain had resources Rome could extract and populations it could tax. Scotland had none of that. Scotland wasn't just militarily costly. It was economically worthless to Rome, and by 122 AD, an empire already stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia couldn't justify bleeding money into a highland war with no end and no reward. Hadrian's Wall was Rome drawing the line where the math stopped working. But Rome tried one more time. Around 142 AD, Emperor Antoninus Pius pushed north and built a second wall, the Antonine Wall, cutting across Scotland's narrowest point, roughly 100 miles north of Hadrian's. On paper, it made sense. Shorter line to defend, further buffer zone. In reality, it was a catastrophic miscalculation. The Antonine Wall was built primarily from turf rather than stone, making it far less durable and far harder to defend than Hadrian's Wall. More critically, the wall that was supposed to extend Roman control simply gave the Caledonians more Roman targets to bleed. Within 20 years, Rome abandoned the Antonine Wall entirely. The troops retreated south, back behind Hadrian's Wall, and that line never moved again. For nearly 3 centuries, until Rome withdrew from Britain altogether, Hadrian's Wall remained the edge of the Roman world. So why did Rome never conquer Scotland? Rome's entire model of conquest required an enemy that could be broken, a capital to burn, a king to capture, a population to absorb. The Caledonians offered none of that. Rome didn't fail in Scotland because of poor strategy. Rome failed because Scotland was a problem Roman strategy was never built to solve.